What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So today, to start off the week, we're going to talk a little bit about Scarlet and Violet Era booster boxes. We're also going to touch on Prismatic and Paldean Fates because there's some interesting things happening in the market, some things that I expected and some things I really didn't expect. And I'll kind of go through every single individual booster box, starting with SV Base. This is a set that's just slowly climbing over time. And I think last week, in the spreadsheet, this was one of the boxes with the lowest days of inventory remaining. That's actually changed this week. The sell-through rate was down on this box, and a lot of the boxes had lower sell-through rates this week, not just SV Base. If we look at something like Twilight, which we'll talk about here in a bit, Stellar Crown, I mean, these were like sub 2 boxes per day sold. Buy it now, North America, which is kind of surprising. But at the same time, a lot of these boxes also had less supply on the market in terms of a 20% leg up. So even though sell-through rate was down, it is good to see that those numbers are slowly coming down over time in terms of the boxes that can actually be purchased. So SV Base kind of just doing its thing. I don't think it's going to go crazy anytime soon. Paldea Evolved, this was another interesting one. So I kind of figured that people would start taking profits on this box. And if you go look at the inventory for Paldea, there was a lot more on the market this week in terms of boxes for sale compared to last week. However, the sell-through rate was actually up significantly from last week. So even though it seems like there are more people maybe taking profits on this box, Hobbiesville was actually a very large seller that put their boxes back up on eBay this week. But even though there are people taking profits, it seems like there are a lot of people still wanting to buy this box at market, which is probably somewhere between 350 and 385 on eBay. Most of those sales are going for. So I don't know. I don't really know what to make of Paldea in the short term. You guys know I just sold some of my boxes to get to a zero cost basis. I still think the set's great long term. I really do think it's solidified itself as one of those top 3 or 4 booster boxes in the SV era. But if you ask me where I think this is going to go in the next like 3 to 6 months, I really do not know. It's going to depend on a few factors, but either way, Paldea holding around 370-ish, and there's still a decent amount of supply out there, I guess you could say, but it's getting sold through fairly quickly where it could still potentially move to 400, as ridiculous as it sounds. But I imagine over the next week or two, the sales are probably going to slow down a little bit on Paldea. I think this week, these numbers just aren't sustainable in terms of the boxes being sold. That is just my guess. We'll see over the next week or two what happens. But moving on, Obsidian Flames. This is a box that had a higher sell-through rate than last week, but there are more boxes on the market. And when you look at all of the Scarlet and Violet Era booster boxes, this was the only box that was actually down this week compared to last week. It was down from 241 or 242 to 239. I know that that's essentially negligible, but it is worth pointing out because every other box was up. Paradox Rift, this is kind of the same situation as Obsidian in terms of the range of days left of supply before we see kind of a substantial move on the box. It's still selling fairly consistently though, around 4 boxes per day. Buy it now. And it's been in that range for a really long time, which I think is a good sign for something like Paradox. There's still a lot of boxes out there though. There's probably 20-ish cases available that you could go buy right now. Now, Temporal, this is a set that sells a lot slower than Paradox Rift. I mean, if you just looked at the sales volume, you would think Paradox Rift is the more popular set. Temporal doesn't sell as bad as something like Stellar Crown or even Twilight Masquerade. It sells a little bit more than that normally on average, but it's not keeping up with Paradox, Obsidian, Paldea. And if you look at the supply on eBay right now, more than half of it below 264, 274, whatever number it was this week, was from Hobbiesville. Hobbiesville has a ton of boxes on eBay right now. I think 100 exactly. Outside of that, I don't really think there's any interesting topics to discuss when it comes to Temporal. It's just going to be one of those middling tier sets that once a lot of these other SVR sets start to make their moves, it'll probably follow. So we'll talk about that when it happens. Twilight Masquerade. This is a little bit of an interesting one. It doesn't sell great, and this week was sub 2 boxes per day. Buy it now, I believe, and there's still a decent amount of supply out there. But what I will say is that it was reduced compared to last week, and a lot of that has to do with one large seller on eBay taking down about half of their boxes, and they also moved their cost or their price, I guess, to buy the product from $258.88 up to $275. So that's a very big deal. I know yesterday I said in my ranking video, I put Twilight quite low at 285. in terms of buying it right now. And I said on the secondary market, you could probably still buy this around 260. You really can't anymore. I mean, there's still a few boxes in like the 260 to 270 range. I'm sure if you're on Facebook, you can find probably even a better deal than that. But with that major seller moving their price up on the boxes, it seems like it's forced a lot of other sellers on the platform to move their price up to around $270 as well. And you guys know when that normally happens, when we see a price increase, when we see sellers start to list at a higher level, we normally don't see that price come back down, at least not to the previous lows. So just keep that in mind with Twilight Masquerade. I did say a couple months ago in a video that it wasn't going to be a matter of if, but a matter of how many boxes from the SVR would hit $300 by the end of the year. I said Paldea would get there. I said that Twilight Masquerade, there was potential for it to get there. It's already very close. And who knows, like even Obsidian Flame, Surging Sparks, like some of these boxes could still get there in theory. Now, next up, Stellar Crown. This box actually had less supply on the market this week. And I've talked in my videos that there isn't a ton out there of Stellar Crown compared to a lot of these other sets. But it just doesn't sell super fast. It's kind of like the Astral Radiance of the Scarlet and Violet era. You're looking at like a little over a box per day buy it now on eBay, which isn't great compared to stuff like Obsidian Flames, Paradox Rift, even Temporal Forces. Like it's not doing great in that sense. Surging Sparks, this is where things get interesting because I put Surging Sparks fairly low on my list yesterday, and part of my rationale for that was considering last week's data when there was a lot of booster boxes out there. We saw a fairly large reduction in the amount of Surging Sparks booster boxes available on eBay this week. And don't get me wrong, there's still hundreds of boxes listed below a 20% leg up from 242, but the sell-through rate is still fairly strong. It was actually better than last week. So we will have to keep our eyes on Surging Sparks in the short term, not just in the long term, but short term, just to see what happens over these next couple of months. And I am going to be curious to see what happens once the Costco bundle comes. If you guys watched yesterday's video, my hypothesis is that we're going to see the sales of the booster box slow down once that bundle comes, just because it'll be a cheaper way for people that actually want to open packs, whether they're a rip and shipper or just your average collector or hobbyist, to get their hands on Surging. Now, Journey Together, this box is slowly climbing. We're back to around $213, $214 on the enhanced booster box. And I just wanted to take a look at some of the cards in here too. We haven't done this in a long time. And I think the last time we did this, the Salamence was over $100. The Lilius Clefairy was much higher. This is down to $127 at this point. And I did highlight it just because it is continuing to move down, which kind of makes sense. More supply hits the market. If we get a fairly large reprint of Journey Together, I think a lot of these cards will potentially reach like Obsidian Flames levels. You could see this Lilius Clefairy being like a $50, $60 card. Salamence could be like $20, $30. And Zora could be down there. Some of the lower tier SIRs in the set are already basically at that point. Hopsation's down to $42, $43. The Volcanion EX is sub 30 at this point. I'm still not a huge fan of the set. I mean, I like the Zoroark, I like Salamence, I don't mind the Lilius Clefairy, but it's just not for me. That said, we did discuss in yesterday's video, get a little bit of exposure to the enhanced box and maybe even just the default Journey Together booster box in case we don't get them in the reprint and then scarcity takes over. And then finally, Destined Rivals in terms of booster boxes. I don't actually track this in the spreadsheet yet. I normally wait 3 months before I add in a booster box or a product into what I track, just because there's so much supply out there in the first 3 months. You kind of have to wait for a lot of it to get moved through. But this box is sitting around $263 now on TCG Player. And I think a lot of people kind of missed what I was saying in the video yesterday about Destin. I had a lot of people saying they disagreed with me putting it so low on the list, and that's fair. But people were talking about buying it at like $220. Guys, if this box was $220 right now, it would have been much higher on the list. But at $260, $265 on TCG Player, I couldn't put it that high. But if you can buy it at $210, $220, sure, then you are definitely right in saying it should be higher on the list if you can buy it at that price. So that's all I'll say there. We'll look at some of these cards too. They're holding fairly strong. This is the best set of the booster boxes from the Scarlet and Violet era, so I don't blame anyone wanting to get their hands on Destined Rivals. And finally, we'll touch on a couple of the ETBs here. Normally talk about this on Friday, and we'll probably talk about it again, but Paldea and Fates just continuing to move up to around $187. Prismatic's back to $108. I had a couple people asking me about like where's 151, where are these specialty ETBs on the list yesterday, which was just booster boxes. I am planning probably at the end of the year to do a huge video with all of the sets from the SV era where we talk about the booster boxes, We'll talk about the regular ETBs from specialty sets, and we might do that for every era, like SV, Sword and Shield. We might throw in Sun and Moon, and maybe even XY, and just do a massive ranking video that's like an hour, hour and a half long. Maybe we even stream it. I think that could be a fun thing to do, just to spend a couple hours shooting the shit and talking about Pokemon investing. But another reason why I brought up Prismatic is just because outside of the Evolving Skies booster box I just bought, I also bought some 151 booster bundles. The only other thing I'm buying right now is Prismatic Evolutions Elite Trainer boxes. And then my plan for the rest of the year is to reevaluate where some of these booster boxes are at, maybe in like October, November, Destined Rivals, Surging Sparks, maybe even Twilight. These are 3 sets that I would like to add a little bit more to my position before SV era is completely done. But as always, you guys let me know in the comments down below what you think. I'm curious to hear from you. How many booster boxes from the Scarlet and Violet era do you think on January 1st, 2026, so the first day of next year, are going to be $300 or more? We already have 1 box there, and then we have a couple others within touching distance, so I wonder what you guys think will happen. If you guys are shopping on eBay, TCG Player, Hobbiesville, I have affiliate links down below. They're free and easy to use. I get a small kickback, so it's a great way to support the channel. With all that said, thank you so much for watching the video. Stay safe wherever you are in the world, and I'll catch you in the next one.